I was talking to a friend of mine about turkeys about a month ago, since Thanksgiving is coming up, and he mentioned to me that there was no such thing as a good turkey, that every single one he had ever had was dry and tasteless. Well, he's never had one of mine. I'm going to show you the #1 trick to make an absolute fabulous success out of your turkey. Here's what you're going to do. We're going to make a brine. Now, I've written out the article, and it's on my website, and it's got the recipe. I've made a few changes here, but that just shows how easy and adaptable this method is. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with 8 cups of vegetable broth. I think in the article I called for a full gallon, and I've got another 8 cups in the refrigerator, but I don't need to heat all of it. Matter of fact, when I'm done putting all this together, I want it to come down to temperature very, very quickly so I can put it on my bird. So I'm only using half. And then these are my ingredients. Now, a few months ago, I did a poultry brine article, and it's a very basic brine you can use for chicken or turkey or pork or whatever you want. But this is the one that I reach for almost every Thanksgiving, and it's the one that my mother ends up calling me for the day before Thanksgiving to make sure she gets it right. So all we're going to do is put our vegetable stock in the pot, and then these are the ingredients that we're going to add to it. Super, super simple. I'm going to show you about these salts here in a second. So we've got bay leaves, 2 or 3, and if they're great big, use 2. If they're little bitty, use 4. Peppercorns, and just plain black peppercorns, okay? Now, you can use allspice berries if you find them. I happen to have juniper berries. I love that little punch that juniper berries have. Dried thyme. If you have fresh thyme, use 3 or 4 sprigs. If not, just use a tablespoon. Rosemary. Again, if you have fresh rosemary, use 3 or 4 sprigs. If not, just pop a tablespoon in there. This is all you got to do to the garlic. Well, okay, don't use the one I dropped on the floor. But this is all you have to do to the garlic. Peel it, kind of smush it, pop it in there. Now, these are the 2 main ingredients that make a brine work. First of all, we have 1/2 cup of light brown sugar. And when you've learned how to use brines and you start playing with them yourself, you can swap it out for white sugar or maple syrup or honey or molasses, anything sweet. In this case, I'm just using plain old light brown sugar. And the #1 key to making a brine work, and I'll tell you why in a second, is salt. Now, right here, I have 3 different types of salt. This is regular table salt. That's what goes in your salt shakers. This is kosher salt. You see how it's got a much larger crystal? This is what I cook with most of the time. It's got a much cleaner taste, and it does not have the iodine in it that most table salts do. You see how fine that is? That's like sand, and that's much coarser. This is rock salt, and this is what you put in an ice cream maker. And if it's not been purified, you can throw it on your sidewalks when they ice up. But here is why you cannot simply use a cup of one for a cup of another. On the website, I've called for 1 cup of kosher salt, and that's this one. However, you notice how much smaller the grains are with table salt. That means this contains far more salt per volume than this one does. And again, this has even less. So, in this case, because I'm going to dissolve it, I'm just going to go ahead and use the rock salt. I have it. I want to use it up. Now, that was a cup of rock salt, and I call for a cup of kosher salt. So I'm increasing the volume by about 50%. Now, all we're going to do over here is we're going to let all of this come to a boil. We're going to let the salt and the sugar dissolve. And we're also going to let all these lovely little flavors that we put in there kind of release into the broth. Now, once that's happened, we're going to remove it from the heat and let it cool down. And then we're going to throw it on our turkey. And you know what's going to happen next? All of these flavors are going to work their way in the next 12 hours to the inside of the turkey. It happens because of osmosis and diffusion and, equilibrium of concentrations. All that means is that all the cells inside the turkey want all of the liquids inside to be the same as the liquids on their outsides. So if you put the yummy stuff on their outsides, they're going to start soaking it up. And the yummy stuff is going to stay in there when we cook it. Okay, so for the next few minutes, I'm just going to let him come to a boil. I'm going to remove it from the heat, and I'll come back and I'll show you the next step. And that's almost all there is to it. to making an absolutely to die for, juicy, succulent, and luscious turkey. Alright, we're ready to go. Because I didn't heat up any more of the vegetable stock than I had to when I was dissolving the salt and sugar, I was able to do my quick chill method. Get your brine out of whatever vessel you've heated it in, because that'll retain heat, and then pop it into something that releases heat, like my plastic containers. I then filled it full of ice. Now, our goal is to make sure that our brine is under 40 degrees, and that's important. The U.S. Department of Agriculture says that there's a danger zone for foodborne illness when you're dealing with poultry, and it's between 40 and 140 degrees. So you always want to make sure that your brine, and we're good because of the ice, stays below that 40-degree mark. You want to keep your bird below that mark too. So a good thermometer in your refrigerator is a really good idea. Now, pick a vessel. You like my specimen jars? I love these things. Pick a vessel that will just be big enough to hold your turkey. You can use a big giant Ziploc bag or a small stock pot or a cooler, but you want to be able to make sure that it's going to be completely submerged. Once you've got your very cold brine and your very cold bird, you can take them together. And this is all you have to do. Now, don't worry too much about diluting your brine when you're chilling it down and when you're making sure that your bird is going to stay submerged. Let's see. We want all the goodness in there. We calculated all that out when we figured out the ingredients to begin with. Because you start with a gallon or half gallon of vegetable stock, and that's fine. But that plans on at least another gallon or so of water and ice being added to it to keep it submerged. Alright, this is all we have to do. I'm going to stick a weighted plate, cover him up, and stash him back in the fridge. He's going to sit in this brine for about 12 hours. Now, tomorrow when I'm ready to roast him off, I'm going to pull it out, I'm going to rinse him off, I'm going to let him dry for a bit, and this is going to be one of the most amazing turkeys you've ever had, except you don't get to have one. You can do one just like this, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, if you want to pull magic out of a hat when you do your next turkey, this is how you start. Use a brine. This is a great basic, and this will get you started down the right road. Alright? So, I'm going to submerge him, pop him in the cooler, and I'll be back tomorrow to show you how to roast it off. Alright. We've let our turkey sit in the brine overnight. I don't remember exactly how long it's been. Probably a little more than 12 hours. It's not that big a deal. Oh, thank you. Do I look better? At this point, ooh, and he's really cold. At this point, all we're going to do is drain him off. Now, when I do this, I work with a very clean sink. I just bleached everything to death. The last thing we want to do is give any openings or indications or any kind of bug lease that are going to end up in our turkey. Let's see if I can get him out of here. There he comes. So we want to make sure that you keep everything super, super clean. I'm setting him over here for a second. Alright, so here we go. We're going to take cold water and give him a rinse. And you don't have to be crazy about this. I do, however, want to remove all those bits and pieces of the dried herbs and spices that I used, because those could burn in the oven. So that's pretty good. Now, turn him off. Get the leaves out of my drain. Okay, now here we have just a baking rack, and I've stuck a cooling rack on it. We're actually not going to roast him off for a little while, and I'll tell you why. The salt and the sugar will help make this have a really nice crispy skin. But even though I'm about to come over here with the paper towels and work on him and get him as dry as possible. Oh, hello, can you give me just a minute? Go on back in the dining room for a second. That's my youngest. He likes to appear in my videos. So even though we're going to dry him off, he's going to get really dry if we stick him back in the cooler, uncovered, and let him air dry for a few hours. Now, my favorite is to give him about 6 hours. That will make sure that the skin is about as crispy and golden and fabulous as you could imagine. Alright, that is now ready to air dry and then roast. That's all there is to brining a turkey. It's the best thing you can do for your Thanksgiving holiday, and if you want something to turn out just amazing, do this. I'll be back in a little bit and I'll show you how to roast it off.